Hello, my name's Chris Smith, again sometimes known as Walter Brick. Today I'm going to be reading a chapter from my book, The Town. Might be able to see it here beside me. This chapter is called Copper Cans and Tin Churches, and these are the copper cans. I'll begin. My mother spent hours cleaning brass. She had an extensive collection of kettles, candlesticks, vases, dishes, and horse brasses. I think she used this activity as a kind of mindfulness where she could escape the day's worries. She often stated that dull brass was shameful and ugly. Her favourite pieces had pride of place in the trailer, including a pair of copper water cans that came from India in the 1950s, which she brought in 1968 from an immigrant who was a blanket and rug seller. They were handed down to me, and I still have them. And they look as good today as they did the day she purchased them, and are now proudly displayed in my front room. Many admirers have offered me large sums of money for them, but I've never been tempted to sell. I can feel my mum's love and dedication whenever I touch the copper handles. I enjoyed watching my mother rub off the brasso with the soft cloths she used to clean the items, and I occasionally helped her with the task. She was engaged in this activity the day her cousin Gerald came to tell her that my grandmother Rose had died. Mum and her stepmother were incredibly close, and Granny's death affected her deeply. As yet, another link with her beloved father, Jeremiah, had been lost. I don't think it matters how old we are when we lose our parents. We suddenly feel orphaned. Even when we have our own families around us, we are still alone in that moment. It was the only time I saw my mother faint. I managed to catch her before she hit the floor, saving her from injury, but Mum was extremely distressed. I'd not seen her so upset since she had received the news that her brother Joe had been killed when I was a small child in the 1960s. Granny Rose's funeral was a large affair, as is often the case with Romany Gypsies. She was buried with my grandfather at Weston Beggar Church next to the cottage where she had lived for so long and had raised 5 of her children. On the day of the funeral in August 1981, as I stood next to my mother looking down at my grandparents' grave, I had a strange feeling that I would somehow hear from my granny again when the time was right. In 1993, I was employed by my local authority as a day centre officer at the Ryfield Centre in Ross-on-Wye. I made several lifelong friends whilst in my term of employment there, as well as a few enemies who were jealous of my success in climbing the promotion ladder. During my time there, I was invited by a colleague, Jennifer, to attend a spiritualist meeting in Newport, Wales, which she had heard was worth going to as the medium was supposed to be excellent. I agreed to attend with her. I'd been interested in the subject of life after death, or, as some prefer to refer to it, life after life, for some time, and had already attended 2 meetings. We arrived in Newport the following Sunday evening and located the venue without difficulty, which was a small church made out of wood and corrugated tin. The church was well attended, and we took up a couple of seats near the back of the room. The medium led the prayers and hymn singing, and then proceeded to give the messages from the unseen world, which was the main reason most people had attended. He was in his late 20s or early 30s, and was both interesting and annoying to watch. Annoying because he had a Lee Evans, the comedian, style of approach. He was fidgety and couldn't keep still or stand in one spot for more than a few seconds. He spoke quickly, giving a large amount of information in a short span of time, and he gave several people messages with what appeared to be a high degree of success. Jennifer and I watched with interest and growing admiration for his skill and accuracy when giving the communications from deceased loved ones. The carbon copy of Lee Evans then announced he had a connection for a man in the audience who was wearing brown clothing. Only one other man apart from me was sporting any brown clothing. I wore a brown woolen sweater, and the man near the front of the room wore a light brown jacket. Lee went straight to the other man. "Right," he began. "I've got a man here who had a problem with his hip and he has a walking stick, and he's giving me grandfather energy. I think he was in the First World War. He's with someone else. And why do I keep seeing a rose?" The man in the tan jacket shook his head and, looking confused, stated that his grandfather was still alive and that he didn't understand the rose connection. Lee looked intently at the man and shifted impatiently from foot to foot before continuing confidently, "It's definitely a grandfather, and I'm still seeing a white rose." By this time, I was once again experiencing the familiar, highly emotional sensation that I'd come to know so well from my early childhood experiences. I raised my hand tentatively above my head, and Jennifer looked at me in amazement as I said, my voice quivering slightly, "Excuse me, I think you should be talking to me." Lee appeared to notice me for the first time. "Ah, man wearing brown," he said with confirmation. He walked over to me. "Do you have a grandfather who's passed over?" he asked. I admitted that I had. "Was he in the First World War?" he pressed me further. "Yes," I confirmed. "He also had a hip injury that he got in the war, and he did use a walking stick." "So why do I keep seeing a rose?" he asked with a tone of genuine interest. I paused slightly before saying, "My grandmother's name was Rose." This caused a few gasps from some of the other people in the audience. He stared at me with a satisfied and somewhat relieved look on his face. "Ah," he said. "She's the person slightly behind him who's now coming forward and is standing next to you. They just want you to know that they are both with you and are watching and guiding you as best they can. She is saying that you are on the right path," he said in his usual fast rate of speech. He reflected slightly. "They're fading now, but they are sending you waves of love." Lee moved back to the front of the audience, and I sat back down next to Jennifer, who placed her hand on my arm and mouthed "wow" at me, smiling as she did so. This episode convinced me that I am never really alone. It also ensured that, since that day, I've not needed to search for more evidence of an afterlife. I know there is life after life. I know it as surely as I know that the sun will rise tomorrow, whether I'm still here to see it or not. This knowledge is of great comfort to me, as it is to others of faith, regardless of whether they've had similar experiences. I actually admire people who believe without the experiences more. They have a pure faith that requires no evidence and is much harder to achieve. Goodbye.